Up till now, Daniel predicted Israeli dominance in the Middle East. It appears, however, that Israel's good times are coming to a rather abrupt end. This harmonizes with all the other prophets who wrote the same message, that Israel would have times of trouble ahead in the end times. So, Daniel's last vision goes on to discuss an attack from up north that Israel's forces will be powerless to resist. Specifically, he says the best troops will be unable to stand. Isn't it ironic how today's Israeli military is touted as having the best soldiers in the world, yet Daniel says they're gonna lose? Remember, Daniel has been perfectly accurate so far. He got the first prior Israeli wars right, and all in the correct order. What if Daniel is also correct at this point in history? What would happen after a future Israeli defeat? Also, remember how several other prophets called Israel center stage for the end times world turmoil. Today, one would logically conclude such a defeat of Israel would cause world chaos. Will this lead to the climax of terror that overwhelmed Daniel in his vision of the end? Who is this future northern king, the one who leads Israel's defeat? Who has alliances with Syria, Russia, and China? Who's attempting to unite the oil-rich nations of the world? Who threatens Israel's annihilation with a nuclear weapon? You just might find the answer in a current Arab leader. A leader who is uniting the world against Israel. A Muslim who is funding Israel's enemies in the Middle East, enemies like the PLO and Hezbollah. The most logical answer for the next northern king is not too difficult. It's Ahmadinejad, president of Iran.
How certain are you that the president of Iran is going to be the next king of the north?
Prophecy is 20/20 hindsight when it comes to individual leaders and specific characters that is within the prophecies. So it won't be actually certain who they are until the actual prophecies are fulfilled. We knew that the next kingdom after the Persian kingdom would be the Greek kingdom, and we didn't know exactly that Alexander the Great would be the ruler that would rule with great power until he came onto the scene. Likewise with the next king of the north. We won't know when it occurs until he actually gets onto the stage. Now the Bible does say that this next northern king will come from the old Seleucid Empire, which we mentioned in my DVD. And it just so happens that one nation called Iran is within that territory. And there has been a nation that has been called Persia for thousands of years. And imagine what country that was. It was Iran. Now you have to ask yourself in the Bible, who was the prince of Persia? Satan. So who would you logically expect would be the power to this kingdom that will come in the end times and would eventually defeat Israel? I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that it will be the nation Iran. Now who the exact character is, I don't know until it happens. When you look at the situation in Iran, there's a lot of instability. They just had an election in 2009, and Ahmadinejad was voted in. We don't know if the votes were tallied correctly. There's a lot of power struggles within Iran. And indeed, Ahmadinejad could be dead tomorrow. Who knows? There is a supreme Ayatollah who many say has the power for that nation, and that's true, but he's delegated that political clout on the world scene to his front man, who is Ahmadinejad. Now, there is another possibility for this king of the north being another Ayatollah that's being primed right now to take over, and that's the 40-year-old son of the current Ayatollah, because the current Ayatollah has a terminal illness and he could die any day. And so he's priming this other gentleman to take his place. And he and Ahmadinejad are like this. So we don't know for sure. I can say that it will come from the nation Iran. And yes, it is a little speculation on my part to say that it's Ahmadinejad. I'm assuming that we're in the end times, and I'm also assuming that Daniel's vision is unfolding before our very eyes.
What makes you so certain that Daniel's last vision applies to the end of time?
I am certain 100% based on his prophetic word. He started off in the 10th chapter, 14th verse, where he talked about this vision being for God's people, Israel. He said, your people, Daniel's people, and it's a time of the end, a distant future. In Daniel 10th chapter, 14th verse, it discusses where God addresses to Daniel that the vision applies to his people, meaning the nation Israel, and it was for a distant future. Now in the 11th chapter of Daniel, the 40th verse, it specifically and literally says, in the time of the end, the king of the north and south will engage in a great battle, which will permeate through the entire world, and it will have Israel on the verge of annihilation. And it's at that point when Christ returns to the rescue. Now, if you go a little further in the vision, Daniel, the 12th chapter, 13th verse, Daniel had just got done asking God to give him more information about this last battle. And it wasn't for him to know. And he says, go your way, Daniel, until the end, meaning the end of your life. He says, you will rest. Your soul will rest with God. He says, then at the end of days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. And the end of days is when the rapture occurs and when the dead in Christ will rise up, and we who are alive will meet them in the air. And we will be with Christ forever. What an awesome time that will be. Now, if you do a study on the last day, you'll see there's several references in the Bible to that being the day of our resurrection or the rapture. Now, I do have to throw in a question. I would like you to consider, can the last day be 7 years before Christ returns, or is it another day?